And now it's time for our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy.
Well, thank you very much for that, Julie. And the first week of July, and boy, what a week it was for energy and gas prices and diesel prices across Canada. It looks like the what we've been discussing over the past several weeks, the prospect of tightening supply of global inventories of crude, gasoline, and truly diesel is about to take a real bite out of the pocketbooks of consumers. Not in a way that one would expect in terms of heightened prices like we saw this time last year when average prices in Canada were about $2 a liter. But we are now starting to see crude prices firm up, the negatives moving away, concerns about recession and interest rates, and concerns about what's happening with an economic slowdown in places like China. The reality is that the United States can no longer use by law anymore or draw from its strategic petroleum reserve. It has to begin replenishing that. And we now know, of course, with OPEC's moves to cut back what amounts to now 5 million barrels a day, sooner or later, energy marketeers, especially those who work on the periphery and don't have a real physical interest in the trade of energy products, now find themselves short because there just isn't enough to go around, and we are seeing surging demand in the United States, which of course these lower prices have done. And that means that if you look at the Energy Information Agency of the United States Department of Energy, saying last month they would see prices that would actually go down as a result of what's happening in the markets. But most importantly, they noted that demand for the month of April, or a couple of months behind, surged to record levels. So really, we're looking at a scenario here in Canada playing out where, like the last week, with a second carbon taxes being imposed on Atlantic Canada, and of course, adjustment on the first carbon tax, Nova Scotia, for instance, saw net increases of about 23 cents a litre. PEI, New Brunswick saw about 12 cents a litre. PEI, and of course, Newfoundland saw about 9 cents a litre. So that's just the beginning of what has been an upward adjustment in prices, compliments of the government. You can look to see those prices moving up an average of 3 to 5 cents a litre this week, right across the country. We're going to start to see, for instance, in British Columbia, prices move back up. In Vancouver, above $2 a litre. The rest of the province pushing towards $1.77, $1.75 in some cases. We'll look in Alberta, where despite it having the lowest taxes on fuel in the country, we could see prices moving back towards the upper $1.30s, where they are now the lower $1.30s. Neighboring Saskatchewan and Manitoba, well, they don't like moving prices at all. So we may see a bit of a delayed reaction where prices in 2 weeks may actually go up 10 cents a litre as retailers sort of hold on. Ontario, where prices are hugging $1.59, look for those prices to be a little closer to $1.63, maybe even $1.65, with, of course, Quebec having the benefit of its own cap and trade system with only a 10-cent tax, whereas the rest of us are paying a little closer to about 16. Montreal, Quebec City will be in the range of about $1.75 a litre for gasoline. Quebec City a little higher at $1.77, $1.78, which of course brings us back to Atlantic Canada. There's been a lot of controversy over why one province decided to add the cap and trade, or in this case, the full effect of the clean fuel standard. And the answer is very simple. There's only one refinery supplying all of Atlantic Canada. Yes, there's other suppliers that they may bring in from time to time, but the markets, as I mentioned earlier, were very tight. Irving, which gets most of its oil from the Middle East, with lower emissions to begin with, compared to, say, stuff you get from the United States, or even if they can get it from Canada, means that there isn't a lot of wiggle room in terms of emissions reductions. They've simply gone to the cap and trade market, which is about 24 cents a gallon in the United States, which works out to 8 cents a litre, which is precisely what New Brunswick did. I'm noting a lot of political opportunism, certainly by Liberals. Look, the buck stops with the Liberal Party, federal Liberal Party. They imposed the first and the second carbon tax, and that's the reason prices are going through the roof, and they're going to go much higher. The Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed what we said at Canadians for Affordable Energy. You can see all of that at affordableenergy.ca, that in fact, these regressive taxes would take a significant bite, especially out of the poorest parts of this country, which happens to be Atlantic Canada. So for Atlantic Canadians, it's showtime and it's tell time. It's up to them to make the decision as to whether they can continue to afford weather taxes being imposed by the federal Liberals, who, in large part, they supported rather cheerfully over the past two elections. Julie, that's it for this week. Let's talk next week when prices go a little higher.
Thanks for that, Dan. That was Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy.